What's up, friends? Today we are here with the second part in the one wheel build series, and today we are going to be building the battery. This layout of parts is not something that you would normally see for a normal electric skateboard because everything here is small. We've got 36, well technically we've got 40, but we're going to be using 3650S cells, Fishpaper, ZBMS, torque box, and my K-weld to put together the battery today. So make sure to stay tuned to see how I build this one wheel battery and how I think it will be best to insulate it and install it in your torque box. Before we start building, I have two shoutouts to make. One of them is to Mario Contino. He'll be linked down in the description, both his website and his YouTube channel. And Joey Z, aka ZBMS creator. Joey makes these parts, these little pre-cut nickel strips. I don't know if you can buy them from him all the time, but you can get those from him. I got these from Mario since I was already buying stuff from him, but Mario and I are friends. Same thing with Joe, and they're both great people. So I highly encourage you to go support their shops and channels down below. I definitely wouldn't be able to do this without the help and information that they've provided on the internet and to me through our messaging. So let's go ahead and get started. And it actually starts pretty much the same as any other e-skate build. First, we're going to go ahead and put our Fishpaper rings on all of our cells. Second, we're going to go ahead and pull out our cells, measure the voltages, make sure that they're all good, and then we will be gluing them together and then welding them up, following that up with balance wiring, and then wrapping it all up in heat shrink and making sure that it fits properly into this enclosure. So let's go ahead and get started. Alrighty guys, we're back, and it looks like I've done more than I actually have. Basically all I did was put the Fishpaper rings on and pull out the torque box. Now we're going to lay out how this pack is going to be built. So to put it in simple terms, our positive is here, our negative is here. How does that work? Basically it goes through, across, through. Probably super confusing, but it'll make more sense later. So essentially, our very first cell is here, positive with the Fishpaper ring on it. You're going to stack on top, and there's your first P group. Remember, this is an 18S 2P group. 2 cells in parallel, 1 P group. There's your first P group. And since we're using these pre-cut nickel strips that go in a staggered formation, you can see where the first one will go is right here, and it's going to connect these two in parallel, and then the next two are going to be also on the same terminal to make it in series. I'll move the camera around a little bit here so you can see. Two in parallel there, and then the next set will be right next to it, 2 in parallel there, and then at the end this will connect all 4 to make the series and parallel connection, and then you'll have your balance lead on top here. Now this is going to continue all the way across, so all we have to do is lay them out in opposite ways all the way across. Until we reach the final series one. And then this series group is going to be connected at the end here to this one, which goes all the way down. You can sort of see the 2 group, and then we have one left over at the end here, and that one will be connected on the opposite side. So actually this should probably be over there, and that would be over here. It'll make more sense, trust me. But we're going to have a small bridge at the end here that will connect the two sides of the pack in series, and that's sort of the basic layout. So what does this mean for gluing? Because that's usually my next step. Well, first we need to put some fish paper between each of these P groups. You can see all these, or between each of these S groups. All of these cells that are touching each other need to not be touching each other. The ones in the P groups can touch each other, but the ones that aren't should not. So we're going to have little strips of fish paper that are going to insulate them rather than using the entire length of the cell, because that builds up to a lot more thickness than you would think, and we're very space constrained here. So we're going to sort of loop all of those groups with fish paper next, and then after that we can glue them all together and make sure that they sit in place correctly. Thought about it a little bit more, and what I'm going to do is pull out each P group and just glue them together in groups of 2, and then we can wrap them and then glue them again. That'll be the easiest for sure. Alrighty, we've got all of our cells glued in their P groups, all in groups of 2, looking nice and neat. Got all of our fish paper on. I also went ahead and printed a TPU insulation piece that's going to be in between the two sides of the pack. This will be heat shrinked and closed in here completely and permanently to keep the two sides of the pack isolated from each other. It's solid TPU, should be a great insulator. Now, next up, we do have to put fish paper between all of these, which is going to be a little bit annoying, but what I'm going to do is use a bunch of little strips at each end and stick it in between each of the S groups, so it'll be like on the edges. I don't want to add any more height to the pack than I need to. I don't want to add any more width because there's barely any extra width. So we need to be very careful with how much fish paper we use. So it's going to be one single piece in between each of the different groups. If you really wanted to, you could do 2, but you're probably going to run out of space in this direction in the torque box. So we're going to go ahead and get a bunch of little pieces of fish paper and stick them in there. And then we'll probably put it back into this enclosure, press it all down really tight, and then glue across the top, and then try to flip it over so we can glue the other side. All right, so I've got a bunch of these little strips. These are actually trimmings off of other packs that I built. I'm just going to go ahead and stick them on here. I'm just going to try this first one and see if this is going to work how I want it to. Go ahead and stick on one strip at each end. I'll make sure it's right on the shoulders of those cells. There you go. Insulating layer. We'll do one at the other end. All right, so now you can see that each end is insulated. And when you press it against the next cell group, no part of the cell will be touching the next cell. Now, this end one I can get away with not wrapping it all the way around, but for every other pack, it's going to need to be wrapped all the way around so that nothing can touch. On the end here, of course, nothing will be touching this end cell, so we don't have to worry about it there. It might look better if it was wrapped all the way around, but I think it's going to be really annoying to stick it down all the way around, so I'm not going to do that. But we're going to go to the next every other and see what we can do. It's going to need a longer piece. There you go. You got that end insulated from the cells that are next to it. And when we go and stick that back in here, you'll be able to see that now these shoulders are insulated. I think that's going to work out great. And then once we glue everything together, it should be nice and firm. And we'll put a big piece of fiber tape around it to wrap it tightly together as well. Main thing is you want to insulate each series group from each other so that there's no way vibration can wear through. Alrighty, so I went ahead and completed the little strips of fish paper. I'm going to show you the difference here. There's a very small gap, but now between each of the S groups, there's a gap. You can compare it to the other side over here. You can see the cells are sitting on each other. That's not what we want. We want that small gap, and this fish paper is enough to do that. In order to keep them in place, we're going to go ahead and glue them now. Since the torque box has a straight edge over here on the end, I can just press all the cells up to the end here, press them all to the left, and glue them straight across. So that's what I'm going to do. One thing I wanted to show you real quick, and this is the reason why I have one layer of fish paper, is look at this. There is almost no movement side to side in here, and that's with one layer of fish paper per insulation zone. If you had 2 layers here, it would not fit in this box. So you really have to be careful, and I think that this is enough, especially with all the extra hot glue, to keep these in place and keep it all safe. So I know some people might not like the fact that it's just strips, but this works, and it's necessary. Alrighty, everything here is glued together now, and I can show you by picking up each side. Got one brick here. This is 9 cells in parallel, and sorry, 9 cells in series, 2 cells in parallel. You can see the top's glued, bottom's glued, and then I also injected some glue in between the joints. So hopefully this will be nice and strong. Some of the fish paper is coming unstuck, which is annoying, but that doesn't really matter. So next up, we can go straight into welding. This pack is actually fairly easy to build. The tricky parts will be making sure all the wires run in the right directions so that they don't get pinched. So we're gonna go ahead and weld it up. It should be pretty easy. Weld these on to the ends, 3, 4, and then the end piece is the positive on this side, and then on this side is the negative end. So we'll have the positive wire coming out here. Negative wire is going to run along the back side of the battery and out here as well. And contrary to what you would think, we don't actually want the discharge leads on this side because that's just going to be too close to where it needs to go, and it's going to be really annoying to get them to bend around. So we're going to run them around the battery over to the BMS and also to the discharge exit. Additionally, we will have our series connection in the middle on this side. We're going to have 2 tabs that come off here. They'll be folded over, and there will be a little piece of copper braid or a piece of 12 gauge wire. I haven't really decided yet. Over there to join those up. And then we've got our printed centerpiece to insulate it all, and that will keep it all nice and separated. The other tough part is going to be running all the balance leads, since there are 18 of them. Going to be quite an effort to run them all. But the little channels between the batteries are great spots for those to run. So I might need to cut some little divots out of this centerpiece so I can run balance leads from this side over here and then out, or either probably on this side, out to the outside of the pack and then to the BMS, which will be right here. And then the balance connectors will plug into BMS. One of these will plug into the charge port, and the other one will plug into the battery plus and minus. So we're on our way there, but now it's time to weld, and this should be one of the fastest packs that I've ever welded because there's really not that many welds to do here. Alright, so I'm going to lay some of these out real quick here so you have an idea of what's going on. If you couldn't visualize it before, it should be pretty easy to visualize with the nickel on here. So we're just going to lay these on here temporarily. And remember, nothing can short out right now because nothing is connecting them on the other side. They're sitting on top of an insulator. If it was on a metal table, that would be a different story, but there you go. So this is one side of the pack. This is the positive lead. This one is going to have the little triangular end piece on it that will stick off and be the tab for the positive discharge. Just like that. So that will get welded on, folded over, and then you've got the wire soldered to it. And then conversely on the other side, you can visualize that the opposite spots will be connected. So on the opposite side, it'll be like that. And then like that. If that all makes sense. Great. We're gonna go ahead and weld it now. Well, there is one side finished. Some of you may be wondering why I bothered doing 4 weld pairs per cell. Well, I figure this is going to be a super high vibration environment, so I might as well just do an extra pair. It only takes a couple more seconds, and I figured that it can increase the strength a little bit. I will say, it's been a few minutes since I welded. Not all of these are the most perfect placement, but important thing, avoid the center 3mm on each of the negatives, and don't go off the cell centers on the positive, which we're fine. So time to do the other side, and then the same with the second half of the pack. After a short period of welding, I've gone ahead and finished off the first half. So we've got our positive terminal here, we've got all of our series connections, and we've got our middle series connection that will connect the 2 packs together here with a tab. So we get folded over, we'll put some extra fish paper underneath it here, and then we'll solder a cable across from here over to the other side of the pack. And that will join the 2 9S packs together. So let's move on to the next one. Alrighty, with that last weld there, we have completed the welding of this pack, minus the positive and negative. I usually like to solder on the cable before welding the positive and negative because it keeps the heat out of the cells. However, now that I'm thinking about it, since this is going to be probably 12 gauge wires and they only attach in one little spot, probably just going to go ahead and solder or weld on those tabs now while I have the welder out, so I don't have to worry about it later. If we look at the orientation that this is going to be in, it's going to be sitting like this. There will be a series connection across here, and then the entire middle part will be insulated from each other. Then we'll make sure everything is glued together and taped together real tightly before we start doing all of our balance wiring. But like I said, I think I'm going to go do those 2 end tabs right now, just because I don't really think that the cells are going to get very hot from soldering 12 gauge on there real quick. So do that, and then we'll start sticking it together, I guess. Alrighty, so we made some progress here. I went ahead and folded over the edges of these, not the edges, I folded over the tabs for the series connection here, and then also the positive and negative. So we went ahead and put some extra fish paper underneath for extra insulation against vibrations. And then, yeah, all of the welding is done. So we're in a pretty good place right now. I think what I'm going to do next is add some extra fish paper by each of the balance lead sections, each of these spots. Underneath them, and then I'll fold them all over, and then we will go ahead and trim some bits out of this printed centerpiece and trim the end there to get it ready for the balance wire running. And then once all of that is ready to run all the balance wires, we're going to go ahead and tape the pack very tightly together to keep it in form, and that way it'll be much easier to handle. I won't have to worry about the insulator slipping out or anything like that. And from that point on, then we can start running the balance wires and solder the series connection, add the positive and negative cables, and then we'll be in a pretty great place. All right, now that our welding is done, I'm going to go ahead and put little pieces of fish paper under each of the balance leads, and then we'll fold them all over, and then we'll solder the series connection in the middle. I decided that that's going to be the best way to do this, so I'll just show you how I do one of them and then skip the rest because it's very repetitive. Cut a small piece of fish paper. It honestly doesn't even need to be this big, but for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and stick it down underneath the edge that folds over. And actually it's easier if you pre-fold a little tiny bit. Shove it underneath, and then it sets down on top of the cells. And then you can go ahead and boop, bend over your nice little balance tab. If you're doing this a different way with like a solid piece of nickel, you would just fold your extra piece of nickel up over in the same fashion. So we're gonna do this a bunch of times, and I'll cut back when it's done. Okay, as you can see, we now have all of the little bits of fish paper on here, and all the balance tabs are folded down. So now I'm going to go ahead and write a number for each connection so we know where it will go on the BMS. And then we can go ahead and solder a piece of braid across the center here to connect the two halves of the pack. After that, we can tape it all tightly together and figure out how we want to run the balance leads. Right now, I'm thinking that it's going to be easiest to run each set down the side, and then we'll put a nice piece of fish paper over this series connection, and then we'll run all the balance leads over top of that, bring them out down the side, around the corner to the BMS over here on the front. Also, this whole end is going to need to get covered with fish paper because the BMS is going to be sitting like right up against it, and this is metal, so don't want that to be shorting out on there. So we'll need to cover that up as well. So the spot where our leads start at is at the negative side. So you can see here, maybe you can see this is the positive side. So 0 is actually going to be negative. So this end cell at this side is 0. Then the next connection is 1, which is going to be right here. And then we go on from there. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 is actually this series connection in the middle. So that one will be 9. And then we skip ahead. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So that actually makes 19 wires total, which is what we will need off of our balance connectors, which are right here. I need to look at the diagram for the ZBMS to see which one is first, but basically these wires will run around and go to each of the spots that they need to go to. All right, so it might seem like I'm just like fooling around here, sticking a bunch of stuff all over the pack, but it's all important. It's all about insulating, finishing properly, and getting it all ready to be soldered in place. Now, we got 2 halves of our pack here. I have glued this TPU piece onto one side, and now we're going to glue it onto the other side in the box to make sure that they're aligned properly. Then we'll pull it out and tape them together tightly with the glass fiber tape. I haven't decided where I'm going to tape it yet. I know I'm going to tape it on the bottom some, but I haven't decided where else yet. So gonna figure that out, and then we'll squirt some glue in there and make sure that it's stuck together. Not really the point of holding the whole pack together with the glue, more so just to keep it in place while I put the tape on, and then the tape will do a really good job of holding it, and then hopefully there will be enough space in the enclosure for me to put heat shrink around the whole pack that will hold it in place even better. So we'll see, but I'm gonna do what I can first. Alrighty, we have a pack as a brick now. We got tape on each end, got tape spanning the bottom, and we got tape at the tips. So this pack will stay together pretty dang well now, at least well enough for me to solder the balance leads, run them how I want, and make it all pretty. The hot glue in the middle doesn't look incredible, but who really cares? It's doing its job. But anyway, it's time to start running the balance leads. Actually, you know what? We'll solder this little piece first. So I'll go grab a little piece of copper braid, and we're gonna span this and hopefully not get it too hot. Alrighty, so I got my connection in the center done here, and it looks worse on camera than it actually is, but it will be perfectly functional. And this piece of braid is super overkill for this size, so it's kind of hard for me to put on there. I wish I had a little bit of a skinnier piece, but I only have this one thickness. So we got it on there, it's solid. This particular location is a spot that we don't need to care that much about the fact that the braid is soaked. It is possible that it could fail if there's too much vibration in the future, but if that fails, then I wouldn't be surprised if the nickel was breaking also. So I think this is a perfectly acceptable joint. Not the prettiest braid joint I've ever done, but it's functional. So we got that done. Next up, it's time to run all of the balance leads. And this part always takes a long time. So we have to run 18 balance leads, and we're going to cover this with fish paper now, and run the balance leads down and over and out the side here. Keep in mind, we still have to connect the positive and negative with 12 gauge wires, as well as the battery charge positive and the negative that will go to the BMS. So got a couple more wires to attach, but I think I want to do the balance wires first, because that's kind of just going to be a plug that'll be hanging off the side, and that can be independent of the 2 discharge leads. All right, so we've got an absolute mess here, and I think I'm just going to skip to the part where I have actually organized all these. They are technically in order. So on the ZBMS, the 13-pin connector is 0 to 12, and then the next one is the 13 to 24. For an 18S battery, you take out the last 6 pins at the end here. You can just remove them with a razor or something. And then you just use 1 through 18, or 0 through 18. So black wire here is 0 on the negative. Purple wire here is 1 over there. Red wire is the next one, that's 2. Gray wire is the next one, that's 3 right here. Another red wire there is 4. White one is 5. Yellow one is 6. Green one is 7. Blue is, sorry, green one is 6. Orange one is 7, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to just go ahead and wrap these down and try to glue them exactly where they need to be so that their ends line up with the solder point. And then after they're glued down, we'll go ahead and solder them. But for now, I'm just going to lay them all out because this really just takes so long. Alrighty, as you can see, a lot of progress has been made. Doing balance wires always takes forever, and finally did it. All these 18 balance wires are all routed. I haven't checked that the number is correct yet, like everyone is in the right spot, but I will check that before it gets plugged into the BMS, of course. But it's super easy to take these pins out and just swap them, so if I mess up, it's not really a big deal. But I tried to get all the cable lengths as close as possible here. Didn't end up doing it perfectly, but that's fine. And so the BMS is going to go in here like this, and the far one will plug in there. Close one will plug in here. Also, I can plug these in because there's no wires connected, except for the very middle one, but that shouldn't make any difference because none of the others are connected, so it's just one cell going to nowhere. But yeah, it'll be like that. All these cables will get tucked down in here. The XT30s will get plugged in where they are required to be, and then the lid should fit on no problem. You feel a little bit of pressure there. I think that's just the balance wires. Yeah. I'll just have to figure out how to route these all nicely before we close it up, but there you see. Kind of go back to iterate the fact of how tight this is. That hot glue on top of the pack, I'm pretty sure is touching the foam on the back side of this lid. So yeah, this is why you have to be careful with how you build your pack and make sure that it is insulated properly, because everything is really under a bit of compression. So looks pretty sweet though, seeing the battery through the pack like that. So very nice. Don't know if there's going to be room for heat shrink, because I don't think I have any of the thin blue stuff that's big enough to fit on here. So we might have to go heat shrinkless, which it's not really a huge deal since the enclosure is plastic, but it is an extra safety measure for moisture if you heat shrink it and then silicone the ends, but we'll see what I can do. So now, next step, since all the wires are routed, now they all need to get soldered. So this is pretty easy. Just gotta strip the end of each of these and solder it down. Should be super quick actually. So take the battery out and do that real quick. Okay, all of the top side balance wires are now soldered. Now the only two left are the negative and the positive, and these are going straight onto the negative and positive terminals of the battery itself. So we might as well just solder those on at the same time that we solder on the charge wires and the discharge wires. So we're going to do that next, but right now I'm just going to go ahead and cover up all of these solder joints, give them a nice little vibration shield each, and then we'll move on. Okay, so I got all the glue done, and now I'm ready to attach these two last balance leads, but I realized that now is also a great time to measure out the cables and actually I probably won't attach the charging cables here. I'll just do a discharge out of the XT60 connector. That'll be easier, I think. Less cable to worry about. So we're gonna do two 12 gauge wires, one from each end of this. And so this is the negative. The negative has to go all the way back around. The positive also has to go all the way around, but it's not as long, which is not a problem, but I just need to make sure I measure this out. So we're gonna stick this back into the enclosure. Also, if you're wondering what the bubble wrap is for, it's so I don't scratch it or crack it with gunk that's on the desk. So that sits right in there. And now we can go ahead and figure out how long the wires need to be. So as it turns out, this battery is so tight in here that the lead just has enough room to fit down there. And on top of that, the discharge nickel is actually resting on the plastic in this corner. So hopefully that won't be a problem, but yeah, that's the thing. At least the cells are still touching the bottom of the enclosure, but not really what I expected. Everything is just so tight. I'm not used to working with such a small space like this. So in any case, I got the cable measured out. Presumably there will be an XT60 somewhere down here to connect this to the discharge on the other side of the board. So I think we'll be good with that. All right, I've covered up a bit here, put some fish paper over the metal part and some Captain over that to hold it in place. And now we're going to try to fit this in like this. It feels like it might be too tight. Might have to go down here. I'm not really sure yet, so we're about to find out when we stick it in the enclosure. Well, I'm quite glad that I put the fish paper because the fit in here is frankly ridiculous. It is very tight in this corner, and it's gonna be really hard to show you, but the blue wire is pretty much squished in between that terminal and the plastic. Now, it lets me press the cells all the way down to the bottom, so I don't think it's gonna be a problem, but I am very glad that I have that fish paper there because it's so tight. So, got it in, it's just a little bit sub-ideal. I would like it to be a little bit looser, but not really much I can do about that at this point. So that's how the fitment is going to be. And now we can go ahead and check our balance leads. And then we're going to need to solder on to the discharge ones here, the appropriate charging connectors. So I actually ended up cutting a new piece of blue wire so I could run the XT60 down here. So unfortunately it does mean that for the BMS, which, man, this is gonna be tight too. For the BMS in here, the charge cables are going to have to run over to meet the, what do you call it? To meet the discharge. And at the same time, actually, I'm curious. I wonder if I can flip this around now and still have enough length on my, no, probably not. It has to go this way, so I'll just extend the wires a little bit longer. Should be okay, but everything's gonna be packed in here, and hopefully there's enough space. Now that we have our positive and negative leads connected here, we're at that point where we need to start thinking about finishing this off. And one of the things to finish this off is making sure that we're connected to our Intrabox cable, which is this thick cable that I said cost like 30 bucks at the beginning. This right here is why it's worth it. Inside of this cable, you have a positive and negative lead. You have a triple pair of a slightly smaller gauge. This will be the charging wires. You have 2 twisted pairs, and then an additional 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wires. So you can run CAN bus, charge port, discharge, and an LED strip through here, which is pretty sweet. So for me, since I'm not running a fancy BMS that has CAN bus, I am just going to be using the discharge port. On here, we'll put an XT60 that will connect to the battery. We'll be using the charge port here, so we'll run charge port positive and negative. So that's 4 wires. And then we're just gonna take 3 of these other wires. Doesn't really matter which ones, but we'll take 3 of them to connect to the LED strip back here. And I'm going to be using an MR30 for the LED strip. So we'll solder an MR30 on here. And then once we get the LED strip, we'll solder an MR30 on that. And those two will connect to each other. For the charge port, it really should be connecting to these XT30s into this one specifically. This is the charge port connector. But I don't know where my XT30s are, so I'm probably going to take this XT30 off and put an MR30 on just because I don't know where my XT30s are. It's pretty unfortunate. But yeah, and then we need to connect this to the discharge splice as well. So we're gonna put an XT60 on these 2. And then out of the back of that, we're also gonna splice off to the BMS for the battery positive and negative. So we're gonna go ahead and do all that right now. Alrighty, we've got 3 connectors now: discharge, charge, and LED strip. This side is all done, so this is all gonna get stowed over here in a little crevice. And now we need to do the battery side. So we have to do the danger soldering of these 2 cables. Normally I like to solder one of these or both of them before I connect them to the battery, but since we had to be sort of tricky with how we did our cable lengths, I left it till later. So now these are both live 60 something volts. So this is pretty dangerous to say the least, but I'm going to try to do it safely and use the back shell from the connector to do it, like one at a time. Oh wait, no, I don't have a back shell for this one because it's the male one, female one. But I'll tape it or cover it in plastic or something while I'm soldering it so that it doesn't fall off and short out, because that would be horrendous. So I'll figure it out and we'll get to it right now. So I worked on some stuff here, and man, everything in this rear enclosure is so tight. 21,700 cells in an 18S2P is definitely the maximum you can put in this rear torque box unit. Now, what I'm working on right now is the charge port wiring. So I decided to delete the connector on the ZBMS for the charge port in, since we have a connector disconnect over here anyway. So I took off that XT30, which I'm now going to use to tee off of the battery, positive and negative, to plug into the BMS as well, since we need that at the same time. Now, space is really proving to be an issue. I'm really concerned about these two 12 gauge wires, how they're going to fit in there with the balance wires all jammed up in there. So we'll conquer that once we get to it. But right now I'm soldering up the charge port wires and then the charging wires for the battery. And still haven't gotten to solder the positive and negative onto the XT60 yet, because I wanted to have the charging wires tee off of those, so I needed to have them sorted out first. So that's what I'm working on now. All right, so some work has gotten done. I don't know how much I recorded. This is taking a while. So I got my charging positive and negative connected to the battery positive and negative through joints at the connector, because that was going to be the easiest way to do it. Otherwise I'd have to splice midway down the wire, and that's just annoying. So I got those. These will connect into the battery positive and negative on the BMS. So we'll go ahead and do that now. You do want to connect this battery positive and negative to the BMS before you plug in the balance connectors. And remember, I did already check the order of the balance connectors, so I know those are correct, but I was waiting to plug them in until we got this. And now that we got that, the BMS is ready to get plugged in. Now, we have quite the mess of wires here to fit into this enclosure. And I think it's going to take a little bit of finagling with the length of this cable that comes into the enclosure, as well as just a bunch of jamming cables into places. The BMS also should really get double-sided tape down. However, I need to put the light strip in here, and I don't have it yet. I need to order it still. So I'm not gonna tape it down until I have that light strip, but we can plug in the BMS. And I kind of want to put Heatshrink over this connection, because I've heard that OneWheels experience a lot of vibration, so I might as well just be safe and put a bit of Heatshrink on here. And remember, this marine grade melty stuff, it sticks well, but it's not permanent. You can cut it off pretty easily. So get this on here to make sure the charging cable does not come undone. And then on the other end of this cable, in the VESC side, we will have the charge port, and that will have its own disconnect on that side as well. So we got all those wires. We got the discharge wires. I'm going to plug these in actually, because that way I can help figure out how far I need to pull stuff down. Looks like I can pull it a little bit further. I did leave some extra length on these cables at the bottom, so I should be able to yank these down a little bit, like that. Hold that a little too far. So you really want this to go right over those valance leads. And lay down flat into the corner. This is really tough. Man. So, if you look at the guide for the BMS, it says to plug in the longer connector first, aka B0 through B13. So we're going to go ahead and plug that in. And remember, you can accidentally plug the shorter connector into the long connector spot, so make sure your BMS is in the right orientation before you plug it in. So we got that one in. Now you can plug in the second one. And there we go. Nothing blew up. Excellent. And we should be ready to charge there. So that's great. Now we need to figure out what the heck to do with all of these cables. That is going to be not fun. So this BMS can slide down actually pretty far since we have all this extra cable length. So that worked out well. So we'll hopefully have space to jam all of these balance cables. I'm thinking right now that it might actually be better for the discharge leads to go underneath the balance cables. So let's unplug that and we'll shove it underneath. Ooh, actually, I want the discharge cables to go underneath, but I want the charge cables to go over top. So unplug the BMS again. Let's run these first. Shove the BMS down there. Hook these around the corner. That's much better. Much, much better. And now this will get plugged in here. Shove it in a little bit further. Beautiful. Now I've got all kinds of stuff in the way over here, but such is the space constraint. Alrighty, that's much better. I think these cables will be able to go on top here and still fit, so you can plug the BMS connectors in again. Got that all the way in, and then we will want to run a bead of hot glue along the top of these balance connectors to make sure everything stays in place before we close it up permanently. Now I say permanently because the screws on top of the torque box here, the ones that close the box, they're actually all self-tapping screws, which means that they cut threads into the plastic when you screw them in. And those don't really like to be unscrewed multiple times. So we're going to try to do a one and done, close up the enclosure, and be all done. Hopefully that we don't have any issues. But we should be able to test everything before we close it up. So there you go. Now, this looks like it's almost going to work out. I want to say that we should be good. These balance connectors are really kind of annoying though, because they're really tight in here. Man, you really could not use any other BMS in here besides the ZBMS, because there just isn't enough space. Well, besides that and the Enoid, I guess, but wow. I'm going to definitely use tape to hold all this stuff down in place before I close it up permanently. But right there, there you go. I'm gonna take a picture of that. That's about how it's gonna fit. Whew. All right, let's grab the lid and just test fit, even though I'm gonna be like holding everything down with my hands. Oh boy. We're close. There's definitely some compression going on there though. We'll have to make sure those wires get shoved in all the way before we close it permanently. Yeah, this is not going to be the most fun thing to close. Looks like the back side is all fine, but once you get down here, the pile up of balance wires and everything gets to be quite a bit. It looks like I can improve a little bit on the bottom though, because the charge cables are kind of pushed in the wrong spot underneath the BMS, so that we can fix. But all of this is kind of pointless right now because battery is done. So that's pretty much going to be it for this video. I assume that I will put some sort of schematic in the video at some point to sort of show what I did in here, because it's obviously very confusing to just look at right now. I did take a good bit of time to figure out where to put things. Looked at Mario's guides on his website. Again, thank you so much to Mario and Joey for their resources on this. If you look at Mario's build guide for his 18S2P board, you'll find a lot of useful information there. That's where I sort of looked at how he ran his torque box wires, and that helped me figure out how I thought I might want to run mine. So with that, I'll take a bit of B-roll of this for you guys, have a nice little outro sequence, and hopefully you look forward to the next part of this Vesk one wheel build series. I know I'm super excited to get this thing on the road. So stay safe, keep on riding, and peace out. Alrighty, so some things have happened. Technically, I already recorded the last clip of this video before, but after some feedback, I decided to put on Heatshrink. So I managed to fit 250mm clear heat shrink on here, and it still fits in the box, shockingly. And then second thing, I'm insulating the edges of the ZBMS since it's metal on top. Probably don't need to do this, but feel better. And then everything will get shoved in here. And I'll take one more clip of B-roll at the end of it all shoved in there. And then other thing, I unplugged all these connectors because when we assemble the front box, we're gonna have to cut this cable, which would short them all out. So don't want giant explosions happening or a fried battery. So these will stay unplugged until the board is actually assembled. That's all.